Hello, and welcome back to my newest review. We are continuing the discography of Men I Trust, and we are now finally on their third full-length album, Oncle Jazz. This is one I was really looking forward to. It is, I think, one of their four projects that are currently out at the time of recording this. This is of the better ones. And yeah, after a 4-year break from their past two albums coming out pretty much back to back, their self-titled and Headroom, they had a 4-year break. They went on tour, and I just kind of, took time to themselves. But they came back with a new permanent vocalist to finally sit down and record this album, Oncle Jazz. Emma is the new lead vocalist of the group, and I don't think that they could have really found a better fit. I think that she has a great voice for their sound and really meshes well with the instrumentals that are made for her. I think that overall Men I Trust does really well when they have these nice, soft female vocalists, and I think Emma was a perfect fit, and I'm really glad they chose her. And funny enough, she wasn't even one of my favorites from Headroom of the vocalists who were featured on there, so I was pleasantly surprised when I was diving in and I found out that she was who they had. Honestly, I think that this is probably Men I Trust most honed in album. It seems that this is the one that they were really focused and concentrating the most on, and it seems like they finally found a sound that they wanted to go with, and they just went for it. And I think really for the most part, they hit the nail on the head and made a project that's really damn good. This one, I think, is just really well done, and that's the reason that is their most popular so far. For me, I'd say the biggest flaw for the album is its length. It is 24 tracks, and it has a runtime of an hour and 11 minutes. And when I was younger, high school or even before that, I used to always, follow the artists, and I would look for, big releases. I always wanted super long albums. I know a lot of people still do. A lot of people still find that exciting, and I think that's much more of a casual listener sort of thing. But as I've gotten older, I kind of realized that it's much more quality over quantity, and I've looked definitely for a lot more with substance. But I actually do think that for the most part, they still have a lot of quality with still having a long track list, but I do think that along the way, they could have had some moments that were trimmed off or shortened, and they have some standout moments that I don't think meshes well with other moments in the track list, but we'll get into that later. But yeah, so 24 tracks, I think that's the biggest thing with this is not everyone's going to listen to this entire thing when you have this much, and yeah, that is my personal biggest gripe. Now, I don't think that Men I Trust really put any bad songs on here or anything that's really half-assed even, but I do think that they definitely could have looked a track list over, as I said, and had some tracks taken out or done something to make this thing a little bit more concise and more concentrated than it already is. Because I feel like when you get towards the end of the album, you're kind of slowly being like, all right, I'm kind of ready for the next thing. And that's how I felt even when listening to this to review it. It was really hard for me to do a full album listen because it was just like a lot. A personal big thing, as I have said, and I will continue to say, is I'm not a big fan of skits or really even interludes. I'm not a huge fan of. I think that if they're done well and they add to the album, they're fantastic and they can do a lot. But they have quite a few instrumental interludes throughout this entire thing. I think it's just a few too many. As I said, I'll get into that. But I think that's the biggest thing, as you have probably a lot of casual listeners going into this not seeing, and it being their biggest album, they're like, okay, I'm going to check this out. And you have all these interludes, and people are going to kind of get tired of it, especially towards the end. You have more and more and more. So I think that's probably the biggest gripe with the album, besides the runtime, is that. Now, as I said, I wouldn't say that there are any bad songs in particular on this project, but there are some that I don't care for as much, or I don't think live up to the highs that are on this, or my personal favorites. But my personal low points on the album are Norton Commander, Found Me, Fyro or Firo GT, I'm not sure how to say that, Alright, Poodle of Mud, Tail Whip Revisited, and Poplar Tree. Uh, the problem with these that I think is that they just really don't have much of a personality as compared to some other songs. Norton Commander is quite a loud mix, with the instrumental I think being one of the loudest on the entire album, and for, as I have said, such a soft experience that they kind of give, this just really didn't fit. And it's not that it's like you're hearing like a rock song in the mix of an indie album. It's just that the instrumental itself feels so loud, and for Emma's soft vocals, it really drains her out. And I felt like it was a bit of a lackluster start to the album, especially this one. I mean, as I said, they took a 4-year break. They got a new lead singer, and this just, after the intro, I feel like this was not a good, super good way to start the album off. But as I'll say that there's plenty of artists whose best songs still don't even sound this good, so I can't complain too much. But personally, I do think it is a bit of a weaker song to start out with. Found Me, the next one, is, in my opinion, suffers kind of a similar problem that North Commander has, where I think the instrumental and the guitar in particular really drowns out Emma's voice at a lot of points, and especially where the song picks up at about minute 45. It is something that is pretty understandable with how quiet she is, but I think that, when you're going through that mix as the, when you're producing this, you gotta look out for stuff like that. But the entire album, she has this very relaxed and quiet voice, which I do think fits perfectly. So I'm not sure if this was exactly, them kind of, just trying to do something louder to contrast it or what, but this is just an instance that I think it personally didn't work out for me. Besides those two tracks, the other tracks I mentioned as some of my least favorites are actually all instrumentals, and sort of, I feel like, intermissions or breaking points in the album. But the problems that I see is that they just don't really stand out or really bring much to the table. And I feel like if you're going to have an interlude on the album, it just needs to be more interesting, and the rest of the and add to the rest of the songs there. And I feel like a lot of these just don't. They kind of just feel like stopping points for you to, between songs, like break points, and then you just get back into it, and it really doesn't do much. I'll talk about two of them. Fyro GT. I didn't really put much here because it's bad, but it's actually because I feel like it stands out from the entire track list. And instead of the usual indie pop we get, this song is much more guitar driven, and it almost feels like it's almost a rock song. I mean, it's got this heavy electric guitar right away, shredding through it the entire way, and it is the exact halfway point in the entire album, and it almost feels like it's marking something with that, like with it being halfway through, but it's not. Like, there's not two sides to this. The entire album is one concise, whole project. It's not a double album or anything. So this being in the halfway point and being such a standout track is, I feel, very weird. And to me, I think it really throws it off when you're listening through. You're like, is this meant to be here? Is this on purpose? Am I still listening to the same project? So for me, I feel like it was a big miss. It's not bad. Like, it's a good instrumental. I think they did well with it, but it just really didn't fit on this project, and it just stands out a lot. The other one I will talk about is Poplar Tree, and I have it here because I have somewhat of a high standards for intro tracks and for outro tracks. I mean, you really, I think, have to come in as an artist with your most creative and powerful moments for your opener and your closer, as that is going to be the first and last thing people hear. You want them to be drawn in by that opener, so you need to put something amazing to start with, and something that kind of says, like, this is the project, this is what I'm making for you, here is the world, and you have to introduce them in a grand way. And the closer, that's the last thing that the person is going to hear from this project, and if they're not immediately listening back to it and they're going to choose something else, you want them to finish the album with something that's going to make it linger in their mind, or something that's really going to draw the whole project together. And either, if it's an album that has like one whole message throughout it, you want to wrap it up and have it be full circle, or just have something that really draws the whole thing in and finishes on a strong note. And I just feel like Poplar Tree doesn't really do that. I feel it is sort of just lackluster, as I've said the past couple times, but yeah, it just doesn't really do much for me, and I feel like that they could have had a much more satisfying end to this. Yeah, I mean, the end here to this project, unfortunately, is not great. I feel like when you already have Tail Whip Revisited, which is basically just a rehashing of an already good song early on in the track list, you didn't need to do that, and then you have this as your final closer, so it's just like, I don't know. The way they ended the project, I really was disappointed by, and it was like my least favorite part of going through this entire thing, but yeah, that's what I think about those. But now let's get to the best moments. Now, for these, I have quite a few. My favorite songs here are Say Can You Hear, All Night, I Hope to Be Around, Pines, 7, Show Me How, and You Deserve This. These songs to me are all spectacular and moments where I think that the group really went above and beyond, and what I would fully expect from an artist to pull out after a 4-year hiatus, and of them working super hard. With Say You Can Hear, you get an upbeat, fast-paced bass guitar that really reminds me of like an 80s pop song, leading the song throughout. And then Emma joins in and it just gets even better as she pushes you sort of through the journey that is this song. I think my favorite part of the whole song is like the shimmering guitar that plays at certain moments. It really makes you feel like you're listening almost to like the soundtrack of a dream. It's really ethereal, and it really adds a lot with just such a small moment to add through certain points of this track. All Night, the next one, is easily a much more easygoing track with a slower instrumental and very comforting lyrics, which talks about a relationship, romantic or platonic. It doesn't necessarily specify, which I think actually makes it even better. Of the person who, is telling the perspective of the song, talking about the person who you're with taking care of you. Sorry about that. Taking care of you through a rough night, and basically them just staying with you and talking about, them doing things like covering the light with a shirt so the room won't be so bright, or giving you a blanket to keep you warm, and them just staying by you throughout the entire night. And it's just a very warm and comforting song, and I think that it's always really nice to listen to. I feel like Emma really, with her lyrics, even though they're so simple, really paints a nice picture for you, and you really see yourself in this scenario. And I think it's, obviously, as I put here, it's one of the best on the album. The next one is I Hope to Be Around, which adds just to this stellar 3-track run, which focuses on our constant battle with relishing in the past and trying to look forward and take in what you're doing in the moment and what's to come in the future. Ironically, for such a heavier lyrical display, the instrumental is very light and reminds me of a relaxing summer's day, which I think, you see a lot of people doing nowadays. You have a heavier toned lyric side of an album, but the instrumental will make it seem really happy and upbeat, as it adds a nice contrast to that, and I think that's what this track does really well. Pines is actually another depressing song lyrically, and it has Emma speaking from a man's perspective while his wife or girlfriend continues to leave the house to cheat on him. But yet, despite her betrayal, he sits and waits for her arrival back home, and it is, I think, one of the most elegant songs in their entire discography. And Emma really did well with this. I mean, even though it's from that male perspective, I think she does a good job. It doesn't seem like weird of her telling this. And she actually commented on this, saying that it was originally just a simple guitar and vocal track, like it was just those two elements, and then they added a bunch to it, and added layers and layers, and then finally, when it was coming to them releasing the track, they actually just preferred the original version, and they stripped it all back down, and then that's the version that we got, which I'm super happy with. I'm sure it would have sounded great to have all these different layers, but this is one of the more simple tracks, and I think it does so well with what it brings. Even though it's not a ton, it does really well with that. And I do also have to mention that I absolutely love the distorted filtered vocals at the start. I think that is just a really well done intro, and I like that if you're actually listening to it for the first time, I feel like you can't even tell what she's saying, but it is just her saying the first couple lines before it actually comes through. But I really like that, and then it's a nice lead in to when her raw vocals do come in later. 7, the next highlight, might just be one of my least expected favorites of the entire album. With a more country-inspired guitar to lead off the track, it definitely leads you into a super fun and I feel like energetic song. The lyrics tell of a friend of their group that they are in and sort of a wild experience that he has, and they talk about it in some interviews where it's just from his perspective. This friend tells these crazy, so almost outlandish seeming tales, and the song was inspired by one of those, and it is him sort of spying on it seems to be people engaging in a sexual encounter, and the latter end of the track has this electric guitar that just rips through and ends on such a high note. And it is one of my favorite moments in the entire album. Just that it sticks out so much, but yet it fits so well. I feel like in contrast to Fire Road GT, where I said the electric guitar on that sticks out, and it doesn't fit the album. I feel like this electric guitar does fit, and it adds a ton to the track, and it is very atmospheric, and it just adds a ton to this. Show Me How. The next track, I feel like I really don't have to talk about this much. It is the second most popular song on the entire project, and it is one of the most popular tracks of the entire group. And I feel like if people listen to Men I Trust, this is going to be one of the ones they're for sure going to know first. It is a narrator telling of them being in love with someone who's not in love with them back, but yet wants to know about their love life, because no matter what, they care for that person. And I think that it is a sweet but heartbreaking tale that I think a lot of people can relate to, and I think that's why it's probably one of their most popular. I do also have to mention that Joey Badass, the rapper, if people are not familiar, he did sample this on his song Show Me on his newest album 2000, and I think that's really cool that you have a more mainstream rapper that is kind of giving light to a smaller group like Men I Trust. And I always like when rappers sample indie outfits, or they have these collaborations like that, so I think that was really cool to see. The last song in this section is You Deserve This. I feel like this song sonically would have been the perfect closer in my opinion. As I talked about before, that Poplar Tree in my opinion was not a good one. I think that this would have been a really good one, and it reminds me a lot of the dream pop duo Beach House, who I'm also a big fan of and will hopefully do some reviews of in the future. I can't help but think that this piece had to be inspired by them. It has, again, like I said before, it has a very ethereal sound to it. It's very dreamy and spacious feeling in a sense, and I think that just this would have been such a good closer. It's a shame that it was just a little bit shy of that, but yeah, that is my favorite section. I also noticed while going through this that most of my highlights are singles, which is not a usual thing for me. Usually my highlights are the deeper cuts or, you know, songs that maybe aren't as popular in the albums. It's not like a purposeful thing that I'm like, oh, you know, gotta be the least popular tracks, but that's typically what I go for. But I can't help that they put their best stuff out before the entire album was. So, but that also just shows how good these are. That, you know, sometimes the singles are the best moments, and that's just how good of music they put out. Now, here I'm going to be starting a new segment in my videos. That is the highest highs portion, is just what I'll call it. This, I'll be highlighting a couple moments in the LP that I'm talking about, Oncle Jazz, in this video, that I think stood out the most amongst the rest. And in these moments, we're going to have best vocal performance, best production, best songwriting, and my favorite line or bar, for when I'm talking about rap, throughout the whole thing. Now, the best vocal performance, I feel like on a lot of this, Emma has the same sort of vocal inflection or vocal performances throughout. Not that that's a bad thing. I think she does spectacular on this and really does a good job for this whole project. But I do have to go with the song Show Me How. I think it has some of the most dreamy vocals on the entire album, and it makes for one of the most encapsulating moments on the whole project. Again, I think hence why it is the second biggest song on the whole thing. And really, it is the biggest song with vocals throughout, as the biggest song just being the intro, which only has one line on it the entire way through. Best production, ironically, I think that the least produced song is the best here, with my pick being Pines. I think that just with the simple acoustic guitar pairing with Emma's soft vocals just really makes for a standout track and makes it one of the most memorable to go back to. And I think there's just that simple production does such a good job for this one. Best songwriting, surprise, surprise, it is also going to be Pines. This being really one of the only songs that tells a story throughout the entire album. It's the only one that tells a singular story, like front to back. I mean, you know, there's messages throughout the whole project, but this is one solid story, and I feel like it basically doesn't need much of an explanation for why I picked this for best songwriting. My favorite line, though, my personal favorite comes from Tail Whip, actually, which is the line of, "We'll be all right, stay here sometime, this country dog won't die in the city." And I've always taken to this line to mean that it means just because you're leaving the place that you're from originally or that you grew up from doesn't mean that you're going to change or let that part of you die. And it almost just seems like Emma is telling this to someone in her life personally who might be doubting maybe her choices to maybe pursue a music career and do this. And I think that this is something, again, a lot of people can resonate with, as when you are moving out of your hometown or, you know, leaving whoever it is that you grew up with, that just because you're leaving doesn't mean that that part of you is going to die. That's not disappearing forever. And I just really like that. And it's one of my favorite moments in the entire album is that chorus on Tail Whip. And yeah, I just really like that. And that is one of my favorite moments through the whole thing. Yeah, so that's it for that section. Hopefully, if you're watching this, you liked that, because I'm going to start doing that for every project I review. So yeah, I was very excited to do that. But overall, this project was a massive step up for Men I Trust, as I said. And I think that they really needed that, as I, you know, enjoyed the past two projects, but wasn't massive fans of it. But it really did a lot for them, like getting them onto the lineup for Tyler, the Creator's Camp Flog Gnaw in 2018 or 2019, I think, 2019. But yeah, so that was huge for them. You know, this got them noticed, got them on more playlists, and I believe even some radio play I did see when I was doing research on this. So this was huge in just overall expanding their fan base and getting them more attention all across the board. And yeah, they really improved their sound. for this, and I would give them a 74% on this one. And yeah, despite having some hiccups throughout the mix, this is a really great album, and it is one that I revisit a lot. Of course, I don't necessarily play it all the way through. There are some skips, but yeah, I love this album. It's really good, really fun. I highly recommend it. The next one I like even more, and I'm super excited to go over that one. So yeah, make sure to subscribe to look for more. I also did start a TikTok and Instagram series of random song suggestions where every day I do suggest a different song that I really like and give a short little explanation of why I like it or what it means to me. So yeah, check that out on there under the same name of Everett's Dream. But yeah, thank you. I'll see you in the next video. Bye now.